McLaren seeks answers as the FIA rejects their request. Max has a horrible start to the weekend as engine penalty is expected, and Yuki finally gets that long-awaited Red Bull test. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Zak Brown has explained why McLaren opted to petition for a right of review over the Lando Norris-Max Verstappen incident in the United States. McLaren lodged a petition with the FIA to be granted a right of review over the United States Grand Prix, with the Woking-based squad eager to have fresh eyes on the situation that unfolded at last weekend's United States Grand Prix. McLaren's Lando Norris was given a 5-second time penalty after overtaking Red Bull's Max Verstappen, while both drivers were outside track limits at turn 12 in the closing stages of the United States Grand Prix. Verstappen, braking later than Norris into the corner's apex, pushed Norris wide while running out of permitted track surface himself, with the McLaren driver given a penalty after keeping his momentum up and overtaking the Red Bull in the incident. McLaren, who believed the resulting steward's inquiry was focusing on Verstappen's actions, was duly left surprised by the fact it was Norris who was given the penalty, Verstappen being judged to have conformed with the FIA's own driving guidelines related to driver behavior in battle. With McLaren and Red Bull representatives summoned to appear before the FIA stewards in the Mexico City Grand Prix paddock on Friday, McLaren CEO Zak Brown appeared on Sky F1 to address the logic behind why the petition was lodged. "We obviously disagree with the outcome there, hence wanting to have another conversation," he said. "But yeah, best we leave it to let that meeting happen and then see what comes of it. You know, these things are difficult, but we have a different view. I think a lot of people agree with our view that Lando was in front, and if you look at it from that perspective, you maybe have a different outcome on that corner. But let's see." With the stewards in Austin quickly reaching the verdict of penalizing Norris, the British driver made the case that discussing the matter following the race would have been a preferable way of handling the controversial moment. A verdict Brown agreed with as he said the sport needs to go for the right result. "Unfortunately, it happened towards the end," he said. "So I do think they probably felt some pressure because I think it was Mexico, SIC, was it? A year or two ago where you had a podium swap. That's not ideal, but what's ideal is the right outcome. And if that means a podium swap or a bit of a delay, I think that's the better approach." Speaking before the stewards reached a decision on McLaren's petition, Brown weighed up the question of what he would consider to be a fair rule change to be made to address situations like what occurred in Austin. "I've seen some quotes. I think we maybe have too many rules," he said. "There's a reason why we have former F1 drivers and racing drivers as stewards. I think they know best what's going on. I think we've got to kind of free up the rules a little bit and let the FIA stewards have a little bit more discretion because they know what's really happening, versus the very technicality of who got to the apex first. Well, if you put your foot down, you're going to get to the apex first, but maybe you won't make the corner. So I think we need to open up and just leave it a little bit more to the F1 stewards to use their discretion, because you guys, Sky F1 presenters, will all know. You kind of know what's going on, and we can't let lawyers around the legality of rules dictate race outcomes." McLaren's right to review was rejected by the stewards, as their argument that the FIA's statement that car number 4 was overtaking car number 1 was incorrect was deemed not to be significant. The FIA statement read, "The concept that the written decision was the significant and new element, or that an error in the decision was a new element, is not sustainable and is, therefore, rejected." With McLaren required to be able to present a new and significant piece of evidence to the stewards to be granted a right of review of the incident, Red Bull boss Christian Horner said he believed the calls made by the stewards at COTA were completely fair. "Well, obviously there's a criteria that it has to fill," he said of the petition lodged by McLaren. "Whether it fills that, I'm not sure. I don't think there is any new evidence." So, look, I mean, you have to trust in the process. I think the stewards are in difficult positions. I felt that the calls they made were absolutely fair and right at the weekend. You can't overtake a car off the circuit. So, you know, that's where we are. It's McLaren's right to invoke that. Yeah, they're probably ruining the fact that they didn't let Max back past because they had such a pace advantage at that part of the race with the overlap of the fresher tire that they would have probably quite easily passed Max in those last 4 laps anyway. Max Verstappen faced a challenging and frustrating day in Mexico due to significant engine problems with his Red Bull RB20, which greatly limited his time on the track. This series of issues prevented him from participating fully in the practice sessions that are crucial for setting up the car for the race weekend. During the first practice session, known as FP1, Verstappen was only able to complete 14 laps before the engine problem struck, which created a setback for the Dutch driver. This engine trouble was not an isolated incident, as it also reoccurred during the second practice session, FP2. Verstappen, who is currently leading the championship standings, is looking to widen his points gap over Lando Norris this weekend, but unfortunately, the start of the Mexico City Grand Prix saw him facing difficulties right away in the Red Bull garage. As Verstappen was on the track during FP1, he noticed something was wrong and began to slow down. He quickly used the team radio to express his concerns about experiencing a loss of power from his Honda power unit. After returning to the pits, the team attempted to resolve the issue and sent him back out onto the track. Although his car seemed to be functioning well enough at that moment, Verstappen quickly communicated to the team that the problem had not been fixed. He made the decision to come back into the pits once again. By the time he finished the first session, he had to sit out the last few minutes and ended the early practice in 4th place. The Red Bull team was optimistic that they had solved the issue, and Christian Horner, the team principal, reassured the media that the engine problem was fortunately a minor one and had been taken care of, hoping for a smooth experience in the next practice session. However, in the second practice session, just as things were supposed to improve, Verstappen once again reported odd noises coming from his engine and was forced to return to the pits a second time. This time, he did not rejoin the session, resulting in him finishing the session without clocking any timed laps, having completed only 4 laps in total. After the sessions concluded, Verstappen spoke to the media about his frustrating day, stating that the current engine situation was being investigated, but he did not know precisely what the issue was. From his perspective, the day felt nearly useless as he only managed to complete 4 or 5 laps, which is hardly enough to provide any meaningful data about the car's performance. When asked about the possibility of needing a new engine and whether that could result in an engine penalty, Verstappen's response was pragmatic, suggesting that he would be okay with it if that needed to happen. Team advisor Helmut Marko confirmed what had happened to the media outlet planetf1.com, explaining that there was a leak somewhere within the turbo system, which seemed to be the cause of the problems in both practice sessions. When questioned further about whether an engine penalty was likely, Marko reassured everyone that there should be no penalties, expressing confidence that the team would be able to resolve the issue. Despite the uncertainty surrounding potential grid penalties and the limited running time, which was somewhat alleviated by mandated use of the Pirelli prototype tires in FP2, Verstappen admitted at the end of the day that he was left without a clear understanding of how well his Red Bull RB20 could perform. He stated candidly that he had never really had a good run, emphasizing that with only 4 or 5 laps, including some long runs, he simply did not have enough data. He concluded with a lighthearted note that it was a day he would prefer to forget. Contrary to what Helmut Marko is claiming about the situation, Zak Brown is firmly stating that Oscar Piastri is not going anywhere, as he still has several years left on his current contract with McLaren. The discussion about Red Bull's driver lineup for the 2025 season has been a hot topic of speculation throughout this racing season. There are ongoing talks about possibly replacing Sergio Perez due to his continual performance struggles. The Mexican driver has not made it to the podium since the Chinese Grand Prix held back in April, and his recent poor results are damaging Red Bull's position in the Constructors' Championship. As a result, Red Bull has slipped behind McLaren and is now at risk of losing 3rd place to their rivals at Ferrari. Adding to the drama, McLaren's team orders have mostly favored Lando Norris, which has led some to believe that Piastri would be a strong candidate to take over Perez's seat should Red Bull decide to make a change. This speculation caught the attention of Marko, who was quoted by F1Insider.com saying, "Let's put it this way, Mark Webber is intensively seeking conversation." Webber, who is the manager of Piastri, has a solid relationship with Red Bull, as he raced for the Milton Keynes team for 7 years and is well connected in the paddock. However, Zak Brown, the CEO of McLaren, dismissed these claims, suggesting that Marko is simply trying to stir up the conversation and create drama. When Sky F1 asked him about Pato O'Ward's participation in the first practice session at the Mexican Grand Prix and whether the IndyCar star might one day transition to Formula One, Brown expressed his belief that O'Ward certainly has the capability to be a Formula One driver. Despite his praise for O'Ward, Brown was quick to emphasize that McLaren is very satisfied with their two primary drivers and has long-term contracts in place for both of them. They are not going anywhere, contrary to some speculation by one other team boss, Brown stated. Nonetheless, McLaren is keen on ensuring that O'Ward is well prepared in their MCL38 car because circumstances can change quickly and a reserve driver may be required at any time. This season, teams like Ferrari and Haas have already had to call upon their reserve drivers. For instance, Oliver Behrman stepped in for Carlos Sainz during a race in Saudi Arabia when Sainz had to undergo an appendectomy. Behrman also took Kevin Magnussen's place at Haas in Baku when Magnussen had to sit out for one race due to a ban. I think he's very capable of being a Formula One driver, Brown went on to say regarding O'Ward. And you never know what might happen. Your drivers can get appendicitis or COVID or face all sorts of unexpected situations. So, we always want to be in a position where we have a driver who is well prepared and ready to step in if needed. Brown is not the only one pushing back against Marco's assertions about Webber's conversations with Piastri. Piastri himself has addressed the media, including PlanetF1.com, stating that it's just Marco's personality to make such claims. I think we all know that Helmut says a lot of things in the press. As far as I'm aware, there's no truth to it, he explained. I'm very, very happy where I am, Piastri added. The team has supported me tremendously since I entered Formula One, providing me with this opportunity. Right now, we're in a very positive position in the standings, so I am completely content with where I am at this moment in time. Red Bull team principal Christian Horner has officially confirmed that Yuki Tsunoda, the talented driver from RB, will be getting the chance to drive the team's RB20 during the end-of-season test taking place in Abu Dhabi for Formula One. This test is particularly significant as it offers Tsunoda an opportunity to experience a more competitive setting with Red Bull's advanced machinery. Yuki Tsunoda has only had limited experience with Red Bull racing cars, mostly participating in promotional events. He previously drove the Red Bull RB18 at the renowned Goodwood Festival of Speed. During that event, he wore an open-face helmet and goggles, which provided a unique but limited glimpse into the experience of driving a high-performance Formula One car. The excitement surrounding Tsunoda's upcoming test stems from his desire to test the car in a more realistic racing environment, which is what Honda has been advocating for. Honda has been particularly eager for Tsunoda to have this chance to test a Red Bull vehicle, believing he deserves a shot to showcase his talents. Earlier this month, the president of Honda's racing division, Koji Watanabe, shared his enthusiasm with Autosport about Tsunoda's potential test. He stated that Honda had strongly requested that Tsunoda be given the chance to drive and test in a Red Bull car. This emphasis from Honda reflects their commitment to giving Tsunoda a fair opportunity to prove himself within the team. Horner mentioned that the agreement for Tsunoda to run in a Red Bull car had been in the works for some time, highlighting the anticipation that has built up around this chance for Tsunoda. He expressed genuine excitement about the upcoming test, sharing his eagerness to observe how Tsunoda performs in a car that is developed for competing at the highest levels in the sport. Horner recognized Tsunoda as a valuable member of the junior team and noted that this test has been a topic of discussion with Honda. He explained that Yuki will be testing the car at a tire test that takes place after the season concludes, reinforcing the idea that this opportunity has been planned well in advance. This announcement comes at a time when Tsunoda's placement within the Red Bull hierarchy has seemed somewhat uncertain. In recent months, it appeared that Tsunoda had been somewhat overlooked, especially as his teammate Liam Lawson had already tested the RB20 in a tire test earlier this year. Lawson's successful performance has raised speculation about his potential to replace the struggling Sergio Perez in the main Red Bull team, which adds a layer of pressure for Tsunoda to demonstrate his capabilities. When asked if there would be a definitive decision made on the driver lineup at the end of the season, particularly regarding Lawson stepping up to the lead Red Bull team in place of Perez, Horner made it clear that Perez remains under contract for the next season. He confirmed that Checo is still part of the team's plans for 2025 and that he is the current driver moving forward. Horner acknowledged that while there's a vacancy for a seat at VCARB, it's essential to remember that all the drivers in contention for those roles are currently Red Bull racing drivers who are essentially on loan from the organization. In addition, Horner mentioned that they have the luxury of time to sit down with key figures in the team management. He plans to collaborate closely with Laurent Mekies, the RB team principal, and Peter Bayer, the RB CEO, to evaluate all possible options regarding the team's driver lineup. This strategic planning process reflects Red Bull's commitment to ensuring that both the main and junior teams are filled with the best possible drivers available to them. The past 2 seasons have really been a major challenge for Sergio Perez. The 34-year-old driver has been trying his hardest, but he has struggled to keep up with his teammate Max Verstappen, who continues to perform at an exceptionally high level. Despite these difficulties, Perez feels a sense of optimism and believes that the toughest times are finally behind him. The recent event at the US Grand Prix solidified this belief and underscored some well-known realities within the Red Bull team. During the Grand Prix weekend, Max Verstappen showcased his incredible driving skills by executing 2 bold maneuvers, one during the sprint race and another in the main Grand Prix, which helped him extend his lead in the championship standings. On a different note, Liam Lawson, who made a return to racing, also impressed everyone by finishing in 9th place for VCARB, making a strong statement about his capabilities. However, there was an unfortunate pattern confirmed at the Circuit of the Americas, particularly for Perez, which highlighted the noticeable gap between the performances of the 2 Red Bull drivers. Throughout the entire weekend, Sergio Perez found himself far behind Verstappen. What made matters even worse was that he again struggled to score points, missing the opportunity to gain any advantages over the other top teams in the competition. With the Mexican Grand Prix coming up, which is his home race, Perez shared his thoughts, suggesting that the problems he has faced with the RB20 car have had serious consequences for his performance on the track. He expressed his frustrations in an interview with F1.com, saying, "When you have a very difficult car to drive, you're making mistakes one after the other." He continued to explain how these challenges make it hard for a driver to focus. "You try to compensate one way or other," Perez added, "and then you are just constantly thinking about how to maximize your car's performance." He elaborated that going through this cycle of self-doubt and continuous mistakes is something no racing driver wants to experience. People forget your career very quickly and what you've accomplished, and even you yourself start to doubt your own abilities, he admitted. "This has happened to me, but I have put in a lot of effort and hard work. The results have been tough to achieve." Perez reflected on this challenging time, noting that it has been not only a tough period for him personally, but also for the entire team. "However, it now feels like we are finally getting a handle on things," he asserted with renewed confidence. This upcoming Mexican Grand Prix serves as one of 5 critical opportunities for Sergio Perez to demonstrate that things have changed for him in a positive way within the Red Bull garage. As Ferrari begins to gain momentum and enters the fray for the Constructors' Championship, the pressure on Perez to deliver strong performances only continues to grow. Thanks for watching. I'll see you around.